Hey, thanks for stopping by the Reaction Lounge. My name's Eric Wilford Watson.
And I'm Steve. Welcome to the lounge. Eric, what are we talking about today?
Bad guys.
Specifically, let's talk about Batman bad guys. In a previous episode, we talked about the Dark Knight himself, some of our favorite iterations, favorite bat suits, talked about a couple of the Batmobiles, kind of all around a good Batman talk, which actually then we have to talk about his bad guys. Famously, we know we've got the Rogues Gallery that can consist of people like Penguin, Two-Face, I think Catwoman's in there technically. And she's kind of weird because she flip-flops a lot between, is she a bad guy or is she just kind of in the way? Once in a
More
while.
of an anti-hero than a straight-up villain.
Yeah. I guess let's start from the top. I mean, who would you say, if you had to decide, who's your favorite Batman bad guy?
I don't think I could make that decision. There's so many good ones. I could probably go through the ones I like the least, but let's go through them chronologically.
Okay.
In the movies.
Ooh. Okay.
Let's go back all the way to your favorite Batman, 1966 Adam West, with the shark spray. Yes. I said favorite facetiously. But in the old TV show, the Rogues Gallery, one thing that was great about that old 60s TV show is you rotated through new villains each week.
Yes.
And that was really, really cool. Campy as hell. You have to watch it through a certain perspective in order to appreciate it. It's what, 60 years old now?
Oh, geez, yeah.
Doing the math in my head.
Which is crazy to think about. And then you go even further back, and there's Batman films that are almost 80 years old at this point. And it's a wild thing to think about.
Yeah, they started live action Batman in the 40s.
That's, about 80 years old now at this point.
Damn.
And it's not stopping anytime soon. But so in that film, we had...
No wonder Bane broke his back so easily.
He's an old man. So we look at that particular film, and we've got who? We've got Penguin,
Joker, Catwoman.
We have Joker, that's right.
And Riddler.
I think, and I've only seen that particular film, in parts, and the Shark Repellent is the one that sticks out to me the most. But I do, the image of that penguin sticks out to me. And I think that one, not counting Danny DeVito's, which we'll get to in a little bit, is a very iconic penguin look. Very opposite to what we discussed when we talked about Cape Crusader in that series and what they did with Lady Penguin.
When I grew up, I was a big fan of the Adam West TV show because the only Batman that I was able to see that existed was either that or the Michael Keaton movie or read the comics.
Right.
Or maybe some sort of cartoon. But I remember growing up thinking that's the way the Penguin looked. And when I read the comics, very much matched the way it looked in the comics.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that Penguin, and they're really good actors. They're playing it up, they're camping it up, but they're taking the role seriously.
Yes.
And I think I like the Penguin the most because he didn't have a ridiculous costume. He just wore a suit.
Yeah, and I mean, there was some subtle nods to the Penguin-esque aspect of it, right? I mean, depending on the iteration, he had the longer tails on his tuxedo jacket or his suit jacket, and a little nod to the old saying like, "Oh, you're in your penguin suit today," right? But yeah, he was just a well-dressed individual. Go with the monocle, the umbrella, but again, there was nothing that you couldn't go out and buy for yourself.
Yeah. And then Joker was just a clown, obviously, but he actually he didn't shave off his mustache. If you look close enough, you see a mustache underneath the makeup.
Oh, wow.
He absolutely refused to shave his mustache for that, but he did a great job as Penguin, and they had a bunch of other villains that were of lesser degree. I think some of them were made up specifically for the TV show.
Okay.
But I think what most people that are watching this video want to know about those, the more modern movies.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Probably.
And let's get into that. So the first big live action, big budget villain we got in the Batman universe obviously was Jack Nicholson's Joker.
Wait till they get a load of me.
I think when you look at it from, and again, back when look at it with the proper lens, was a really good iteration of that kind of a character. You look at it more today, and that there's a lot of like the dark and like some severe mental issues that are going on and just like psychotic incidences. But that character, I think, was the first time we really got to see someone who was a bad guy that was cheery. And you got that famous Jack Nicholson smile that came with it. I just think of his head popping through the door in The Shining. But I mean, this was your first time we saw that kind of a bad guy. And it's not hard to see why it was an instant hit, that kind of a villain.
Yeah, and anybody who saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or I think that movie almost was an unintentional audition for Joker.
Fair. Yep.
Who looks and acts and sounds crazy with a smile on his face? Well, how about Jack Nicholson? Well, of course. Yeah. I think they had talks with Robin Williams of doing it, but I don't think that would have been as good.
I don't think that would have went.
Robin Williams is comedic, but he doesn't have that. I've seen Robin Williams do some dark stuff.
Yep.
Like 1 Hour Photo was a really good movie where he plays a darker character, but just the maniacal, sadistic, hysterical laugh. Jack Nicholson is so good.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing to differentiate there. Is there's a difference between being able to do dark and evil. You can be a good guy who's still dark, right? I mean, look at Frank Castle and Punisher. But to do evil is different. And I don't think Robin Williams would have done very well with that.
Yeah, so Jack Nicholson was absolutely perfectly cast. And of course, you always love your first the most. So being that I saw that one in the theater, and that's what I grew up thinking of as the Joker, that probably, a soft spot on my heart for that version of Joker.
That's fair.
I love him in the purple suit. He's got a little bit of that aspect of his personality before he gets dunked in the vat of chemicals. He already wears a purple suit.
Yep.
He already plays with cards. He just doesn't. The facial injuries and stuff just pushed him over the edge.
It's funny you say that about loving your first the most, because now I'm going through the Joker iterations that I've watched on screen and so on and so forth. And my first true exposure to a live action Joker, because I know the animated one, right? And I think of the animated film Batman: The Mask of the Phantasm, and that Joker was in there for a period of time.
Should keep my green can away from the green screen.
Disappears. But my first live action one was Heath Ledger, and in The Dark Knight. And I think that was my first time of being like, that's dark. Oh, there is something so wrong with that guy. And that I kind of hold him to that pinnacle of that is my Joker.
Mm-hmm. And if you watch that first, absolutely, that makes sense. But we'll talk more about Heath Ledger's Joker later. But one other thing about the 1989 Batman movie is it had Harvey Dent in there.
Did it?
Yeah. He never turned into Two-Face in that movie, but Billy D. Williams was Harvey Dent.
I didn't know that. I learned something today.
They actually have a version of the comics where they take on the continuity of the original 1989 Batman movie and then extrapolate on what a sequel to that would have been. And they actually have a comic book version of Billy D. Williams as Two-Face.
Really?
Which is pretty cool.
That's fascinating.
But I think he was intended to be Two-Face in sequels, but for whatever reason, it ended up being Tommy Lee Jones, which we'll talk about later. Keep trying to jump ahead.
It's hard not to with some of these comparisons. So then who would be next?
Well, one last thing about Joker from that original movie is another good friend of mine really dislikes the Joker dies in that.
Okay.
Because, well, number one, Batman isn't supposed to kill people, which is bullshit, by the way. But Batman isn't supposed to kill people. Batman murders the fuck out of people in that 1989 movie. He literally puts a bomb between somebody's legs and explodes their ass. But Joker dies.
I'm trying to recall that. I don't.
He goes into the plant, and the little bomb comes out of the front of the Batmobile.
Really?
So let's go to Batman 2, or Batman Returns. Batman Returns is a fantastic movie for the most part, although there's elements of it I did not care for at all. There's some visuals that I like.
Yeah.
But it is definitely a few notches, in my opinion. I know a lot of people really like it, but in my opinion, it does not live up to the 89 movie.
I think a lot of people like it from the nostalgia standpoint. I mean, there are just countless memes at this point and so many references that you can make back to that one film alone from the villains in that. I mean, we had Poison Ivy. Was Freeze in that one? That was the one with Freeze?
No, that wasn't Freeze.
Oh, that was not, okay.
Batman Returns has Danny DeVito as Penguin.
Yes.
And it has Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman.
Yes.
And then it has, I forget the character's name, but whoever Christopher Walken was.
Oh, I forgot he was in that one.
Yeah, he legit kills Catwoman until she gets licked back to life by cats for reasons.
So weird. So, okay, now that I'm thinking of the right movie, that Catwoman was interesting for me. I don't think since then I've never seen a Catwoman portrayed in that light. She fit more of that anti-hero bill, I think, than anything.
Yeah.
Fun fact, when she was walking through the shopping center and she was like whipping the mannequins, that was an actual take that she did, one shot, and like just whipped each one of those mannequins. So, I mean, hats off to her. That Penguin with Danny DeVito is my standard for Penguin. That was the one that I remember, and when I think of Penguin, and I think of him being disformed, and I think of him being kind of grotesque and disgusting. That is the one that I think of, and just oddly enough, don't judge me too hard, I think of whatever scene it was where he came out in his long underwear, and I'm like, his hair's all raggedy, and he's just his fingers are deformed and all put together like flippers, and it's just like that is what sticks in my head when I think of Penguin.
See, that's probably the earliest example of me being disappointed by a movie portrayal of a character I liked. I, at that point, was a big Batman fan. I was reading the comics. Okay. I was a big fan of the 60s show. And then after seeing, just the guy in a suit who is basically a crime boss, sort of a mobster who dresses in a top hat, maybe a little bit eccentric with his laugh, but really gadgets in his umbrella, a little bit silly, but he's just a crime guy. And then to see him as the grotesque monster, I'm like, What the fuck are you doing? He's not called the Penguin because he has flippers. He's called the Penguin because he dresses in a tuxedo. And then in the same movie, they have Catwoman. She's not a lady. She's not a cat burglar. There's literally a cat. She's licked back to life by cats. Like, you're taking this too literally. Yeah. And that really just almost destroys the entire movie for me.
That was one where someone had an idea and they were like, hey, let's take a creative liberty to this. And I have to feel like in that conversation with the studio or the director or the writers, whoever, they're like, listen, I've got an idea. I want to take a different direction. It's either going to really, really pay out or it's not going to work so well. I think at the time it worked, and now we look back on it and like, no, this is not the right call.
But for people that weren't really familiar with the comic book character and just saw the movie for what it was all by itself, maybe comes off better. If I watch the movie through that lens, I can enjoy it more. But when I try to compare it to the comic book character I love, I just got to separate those things in my mind in order to appreciate them.
That's fair.
Another thing that makes the second movie, this is sort of off topic of the villains, but Tim Burton is too Tim Burton-y in Batman Returns. The style of Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands and Corpse Bride and all that weirdness that he likes.
That made its way into this film very
a lot more than it did the first movie.
Yes. I forgot that one was Tim Burton. I am just going down memory lane with this topic today. That's that's the one where, correct me if I'm wrong, at one point in the movie, Penguin had this. Didn't he have a vehicle that was shaped like a big rubber duck or something?
Yeah, I mean, he sent out like wind up duck bombs.
Yes. Okay, I am slowly remembering.
I remember having a comic book version of the movie that I enjoyed more than the movie. But here's a piece of trivia you might not know. Penguin's dad in that movie, when they have the scene where they drop the deformed baby in the sewer and leave, the actor who played Penguin's dad was the same guy who plays Pee Wee Herman.
What?
Yeah. He's not dressed like Pee Wee, so you don't recognize him, but that's... I forget the actor's name, but that's Pee Wee Herman.
I would have never guessed that.
And in the Gotham TV show where they have Penguin, Penguin's dad is also played by Pee Wee Herman in that show.
Really?
Yep.
Like, if I'm not paying Pee Wee Herman,
I'll prove it to you, and I'll put it right up now.
Looking forward to seeing that, actually. Wow. I did like we'll get back to that one in a little while. Okay. Interesting.
So you mentioned Poison Ivy. She's in the third movie with Val Kilmer. I think she's in the third and fourth. I could be wrong about that.
I think she's just in one.
Okay. The third and fourth movie of that quadrilogy of Tim Burton produced movies, the last two kind of blur together in my head. So I know we got Riddler, who was Jim Carrey.
I think Riddler with Jim Carrey was with Two-Face Tommy Lee Jones.
Yes.
And then I think Ivy, Bane, and Freeze were in the other one.
Okay, you're right.
Yes, because yes.
And I think seeing Jim Carrey do the Riddler kind of plays into what we said earlier about why Robin Williams would have been bad as Joker. Because they went for the comedy actor to do the villain.
Yep.
And I don't think Jim Carrey's Riddler worked.
No. Jim Carrey's Riddler was weird, and the suit for it was even weirder, and he was too Jim Carrey-y. He was animated, he was all over the place, he was throwing himself over things. He was too animated for me with that character. And I mean, his suit alone, I mean, it was. You guys remember the textbook covers in school? If you either made it out of a paper bag or you got that like weird stretchy stuff. That's what his costume seemed like it was made out of, and it was just weird.
I wouldn't have thought of that, but you're right, man.
Oh, I didn't care for
and Tommy Lee Jones is so good at being a dramatic actor. He can be silly, I guess, but he's better as a straight man. To see him like laughing and being maniacal, they should have. He didn't seem split personality enough. It seemed like he was just all evil guy. He just happened to have half of his body not look crazy.
I think that one probably could have worked better if it would have been a different film, and if they would have went with a different style for his costume and his makeup. I think it maybe could have worked, because they could have played him off as more of a crime lord-y type of a villain. But they tried to match Goofy with Goofy, and you had to make him, in a way on screen, complement the over-the-topness of what Jim Carrey's Riddler was doing. And then they just ended up in a really weird combination, his face makeup being part of it. I think this is a situation where the makeup department really dropped the ball for this film.
I did like the image of him standing in his room where he's got half of the room decked out like, he listens to Marilyn Manson, and the other half is all like white fluffy pillows and angelic stuff, and even has like the dark leather-clad woman and like the prim and proper woman in white on the other side. He's just standing exactly in the middle.
And like, I get what they were trying.
They're trying to make it look like the comic book.
Yeah, and they tried to show it visually with his personality being so split, but I would have liked to have seen it done more with the actor himself and the performance versus the props.
Yeah, they should have played it more like split personality, but it really wasn't. He just liked to flip his coin and laugh a lot. It was a really wasted opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Do we really have to talk about Batman and Robin? Mr. Freeze. There's actually a compilation where they have all of the Arnold Schwarzenegger Freeze puns like in one long clip. If you just watch that, you've basically watched the movie.
So here's what I'll do. I'll give a shout out to my other channel, because we just tore this apart in a different conversation. But who killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age! So bad.
Your pleas of mercy are cold on my ears, or whatever he says.
It's so bad.
Oh, and he steals diamonds because there's a nickname of diamonds as being ice. Come on.
No, he needs them to fuel his suit.
He's even smoking a frozen cigar. He's got like a blue cigar that he's smoking.
In his later, he's playing the I'm Mr. Freeze, I'm Mr. Ice, what's his name? The dude from the Year Without Santa Claus. He's got that. There's Heat Miser and whatever the case is. Let me throw a clip in here.
I can't, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, you'll know what I mean. Use the Google. You'll know what I'm talking about. But it's like his theme song when he's in his club and he's got his robe on, and he's like painted blue, and he's like, I'm Mr. Freeze, Mr. Cold, Mr. Ice. It's the only musical number you're getting out of me. It was bad.
It shouldn't be that your live action adaptation is campier than the 60s show, which is known for being campy. The Mr. Freeze in the movie is way, way sillier than the Mr. Freeze in the 60s show.
You are freezing, yeah? If I choose, I can make you freeze to death.
He's actually somewhat menacing in the 60s show. He's got like, he tortures people with cold. He has like a warm area, flips a switch, and it gets cold. Mm-hmm. They're like trying to stay in the little warm area and not freeze to death.
Yeah.
They got a freeze gun where it legit freezes people, and he doesn't laugh maniacally while he does it.
I think that was just Freeze has such an opportunity to be such a dark character and such a powerful character, and the movie just didn't do it. And then his henchmen were hockey players. The hockey players from hell, as Batman and Robin said.
Oh man.
It's just, and then I think we talked about this in the other episode, but you get knocked down when the whole museum gets freeze, and what do? Click your heels like Dorothy from Wizard of Oz, and boom, pop out ice skates. It was just bad. And then you transition, so then Freeze himself is its own problem as a villain. Then you introduce Bane, who here's the thing. I'm not going to say it was a good portrayal of Bane, but I'm not going to say that it was the worst Bane that I've ever seen. This was, I think, the most accurate on-screen adaptation of Bane that they have put out there so far as live action goes. You have the scrawny guy, he got pumped full of venom, he gets really super strong, you hit the thing on his chest and he gets roided out, he becomes super strong. I think it was a fairly faithful adaptation, all things considered.
He's just barely in the movie and he's barely a character.
Correct. But yet he was one of the more accurate ones.
He looked right as far as the comics.
He looked right. The luchador mask, and I mean, I wasn't horribly upset about him.
I barely remember anything about Poison Ivy. She just had plants and existed, and that's basically all I remember.
I have a long-running childhood crush on Poison Ivy from that movie because Uma Thurman did just so good. But she's in the same category as Free. She has some really bad one-liners. And she had the whole, like, I'm to die for, and she kissed a couple of the guards and they died. And then she tried to kiss Robin, and, the whole rubber lips thing. Like, again, just bad writing. And she had the same, I think her suit might have been made from the leftovers of Jim Carrey's Riddler. It was the same thing. It was bad. I mean, but it could have been worse, I suppose.
How? Sorry. I just asked everything about that movie. Moving on.
It could have been worse.
The next thing we're going to talk about is Batman Begins.
Holy cliffhanger! The most horrendous is yet to come!